fifth and final module of our Microsoft Virtual Training Day implementing hybrid infrastructure. In this module called Hybrid Security, we will have a look on things like how we can take advantage of Azure management and security technology to have a look that our servers have the most recent updates installed and are compliant with our company policies. So let's have a look. In this session, we are going to talk about hybrid cloud security. And we're going to have a look how organizations can take advantage of cloud security from Azure for their on-premises or even multi-cloud systems. We are again going to use our demonstration company Tailwind Traders, which represents everyone and no one at the same time, to make some examples of how you can actually implement hybrid cloud security in your environment and take some advantage of what a company and an organization can actually do. So to get started, again, I want to quickly highlight a couple of the requirements Tailwind Traders has. And again, in this session, we're going to talk about and focusing on security. Now, Tailwind Traders, as mentioned before, is a company which goes in a hybrid environment, meaning that they are moving some of your workloads to Azure, but for other reasons, some of their workloads need to stay on-prem. So they, for example, have workloads which can't move to Azure because there's no network connectivity, or they have a bad latency to the next Azure region, as well as some data sovereignty challenges as well, where they can't store data outside of their premises or outside of their country. Now, however, Tailwind Traders wants to take advantage of the Azure cloud security because they saw how advanced their cloud security services in Azure are, and they want to use the same set of tools to all secure their on-premises workloads as well as their cloud workloads running in Azure and even at other cloud providers. So we're going to have a look on which hybrid security technologies Tailwind Traders should use for their environment. So in this session, we're going to have a couple of different scenarios Tailwind Traders will have a look at, and some of the challenges they're actually dealing with today. And we're going to have a look how they can solve these challenges using some of our Azure services. So the first one we are going to have a look at is how can Tailwind Traders ensure that all their servers in their hybrid environment have the most recent software updates installed. If you are a server admin, you know which is responsible for patching your systems, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's very difficult to actually make sure that all the systems have the latest patches installed, that they're actually automatically patched, especially when they're running at multiple different locations. The next thing we're going to talk about is how they can manage their hybrid cloud environments and their servers and their systems to check that all their configurations are compliant with their company policy. We're also going to have a look at how they can actually see if important files on their hybrid cloud compute workloads have been altered. So we're going to check with, for example, different security tooling to make sure that if there is a security threat, we can actually detect that. And then last but not least, we're actually going to we're going to have a look at how they can take advantage of the event logs of your Windows systems or also syslogs of your Linux systems in a log analytics workspace, and then actually scan the environment through these logs and have different information and take advantage of that. And then from there, even create alerts to see when there's something happening. So these are some of the scenarios we're going to have a look at. With that, we are looking at the following technologies. In this session, we're basically looking at Azure Update Management. We're going to have a look at Azure Arc Enabled Service, especially together with Azure Guest Configuration policies to actually manage the configuration of the operating systems and audit these machines to see if they are compliant with our company policies. We're going to have a look how we can take advantage of Azure Security Center, not just for our workloads running in Azure, but also our workloads running on premises or at other cloud providers. And then we're going to have a look at hybrid monitoring and how we can actually monitor our servers and then take advantage of the centralized log collection we have using Azure Log Analytics, and then basically run queries against these logs and actually find out and then even create alerts from there. So before we start with that, I quickly want to talk about cloud security in general. And again, that doesn't really just mean for the workloads you run in Azure. It means your hybrid cloud as well, right? And we see that as a shared responsibility. Microsoft is obviously committed to secure the foundation, meaning that we make sure that the physical assets like our data centers are protected, that no one can access them at any time, that the data is protected, that no one can steal data out of it, and so on. We also want to make sure that the same thing happens, that our data center operations are secure, to make sure that obviously the data centers are running on one hand, but also that no one can access your data. And the same thing is obviously about the cloud infrastructure, talking from hardware as well as software, right? We want to make sure that the software again and the hardware again running in our data centers, but also the things with Azure Stack HCI, for example, or Windows Server, or Azure Stack Hub, or Azure Stack Edge, and all these devices, that they are also secured, and we actually want to make sure that they get the most security they can get. But there are some parts where the customer needs to take action, and that is where we see it as a joint responsibility, right? We don't just want to give the customers the tool in place and then just see whatever the customer does with it, because let's face it, we all have enough to do, and none of our companies probably has enough security people in the company itself, right? And so Microsoft, we internally spend billions on security and making sure that our assets are secure, but also our customer assets are secure. And so we want to take advantage of that, of our knowledge, and share that with our customers and provide our customers the built-in tools and controls to make their workloads and their deployments secure. So even though we make sure that the platform is secure, when it comes to virtual machines, servers, and virtual networks, you need to make sure that you actually secure them. When it comes to apps and workloads running in Azure, but also in your own data centers, you want to make sure that they are secured and that they're configured in the right way. And same thing with data. You also want to make sure that this is encrypted, right? And again, there's no difference from like running it in Azure or running it in your own data centers. If you're using Microsoft technology, for example, in Azure, we want to provide you with the right tool set to actually take security measurements, encryption, and so on to help you securing your workloads. And again, the same thing also applies obviously for hybrid workloads. We want to extend that. We don't just want to say, okay, we're going to help you with security as soon as it runs in Azure. We also want to help you obviously with security when it runs in your own data center or even at another cloud provider. Now, let's start with the first challenge we are seeing from Tailwind traders. One of the largest challenges is update management. So what Tailwind traders needs to do is they need to actually patch physical and virtual machines running on premises and in the cloud, in Azure, but also other cloud providers. And they're running Windows Server and Linux workloads. And again, they need to make sure that they have the latest patches installed. They want to have a possibility to get a compliance view to actually see which systems are not patched and which systems are patched, so they know, okay, where they need to work on. And then they also want to have a centralized dashboard, if you will, where they can actually start the update process and deploy these software updates to the specific machines. And that is exactly where Azure Update Management comes in. So Azure Update Management does a couple of different things. If it's configured, it actually goes out and checks the update compliance states of Windows Server and Linux machines running on-premise, at other cloud providers, or in Azure. It then can go out and even deploy and install software updates, again, running on Windows or on Linux, basically on any infrastructure. And that really helps to avoid that Tailwind traders need to have different products depending on the operating system or the location that server is running. So that is where Azure Update Management comes in. And if we have a look at the architecture here, here's a quick architecture diagram, how that can work. You can see here on the right, we have Azure, and then on the left, we have on-premises or Azure VMs, really depending on where you run them. Now, what are you actually doing? We're taking Azure Automation and Log Analytics and have built this update management solution with these products. So we actually go out and install the Log Analytics agent, which then reports the update status to the Log Analytics workspace. The update management solution then goes through these logs and basically can find out, okay, which updates are installed on which specific system and which ones are missing. And then with the deployment part of the update, which I'm going to show you in a quick demo, you can actually go out and trigger the updates on these specific machines. And again, in different environments, again, we can use Azure, but in a hybrid environment, we have something called the hybrid runbook worker, which then actually will go through and trigger these updates. And you can even configure pre and post steps. So if you, for example, need to actually like run a script before you install an update and then run a script after the update is installed, you can do that as well. So with that, let's have a look at the Azure Update Management demo. Now here I'm back in Windows Admin Center, and then what I'm going to show you is I'm going to onboard my on-premises systems here running in my local domain, in my local data centers, in the Tailwind Traders data center. I'm also going to onboard one of the Azure machines, so you can actually see that we can then both see Azure VMs and non-Azure VMs side by side. Again, here I could also add machines from other cloud providers if I needed to. Again, doesn't really matter where these machines are running. At the end, we can see them in a single pane of glass. So let's start and let's onboard one of these servers. Now I'm going to do that using Windows Admin Center. I'm going to the update solution or the update extension. There I can manage my updates locally. I can go and say, okay, install the latest updates. However, I want to have that centralized view. So I'm going to join that server to Azure Update Management. So I click on the server I want to join. I go to Updates. And here I can now click on Update to onboard the server to Update Management. I'm going to select the right subscription, the region for the Log Analytics workspace. I give the Log Analytics workspace a name. I give the Azure Automation account a name, and I create a new resource group or use an existing one. In my case, I have the hybrid RG, and then I'm going to click on Setup. Now, what this will do is it will go out and create, in my case, a new Log Analytics workspace. And then it will install the agent on that specific server and join that data to the Log Analytics workspace. It will also create the Azure Automation account. Now, in the meantime, let's go to our server running in Azure. We also can do that using Update Management. Again, do the same steps here to onboard that to Update Management. You could also join a server or a VM running in Azure directly within the Azure portal. You don't need to use Windows Admin Center in this case, but if you're using Windows Admin Center, you can do that as well. You can see here, I'm going to use the same Log Analytics workspace and Azure Automation account I'm using for the other machine as well. So basically then we get the single control plane. So this again will then download the agent and join it to the specific Log Analytics workspace. And if we go then to Azure, to our automation account and the update management solution, we will now see here our two machines here. One of them running in Azure, the other is non-Azure VM, and one of them is not compliant. So let's fix that and create a new update deployment. We provided a name. We can select the operating system because depending on which operating system you're patching, it's a little bit different. You can then select a group of machines. Now, a group can be different types. We can, for example, just select all the servers joined to a specific subscription. We can also filter on tags, for example, and so on, or locations and resource groups. We can also do that similar to, for example, non-Azure VMs, and we can all filter that. Or we can, I quickly show you that, we can also just select a single VMs. In this case, I can just go and, for example, search, or I can just list my machines here. And then here you see the two machines, and I could just add them as well, like just separately as well. In the most production case, you will probably add a group based on, for example, tags. And then you can select which update classification should be installed. You can include and exclude updates if you need to. You can then schedule the specific update. So I can go that, and I can also create a recurring update if I want to. I can then configure pre and post scripts. I can configure the length of the maintenance window and the reboot options. So reboot if required sounds like a good idea. And then I create that scheduled update deployment. Now this will go out and then start that deployment for my machines. And you can see here, one of the machines is not compliant, but both of them have updates missing. So this is now a deployment. We can see that on the deployment schedules. We can see that, and after a while, after deployment has run, we can do a quick, for example, refresh. And now you will see that both servers or machines are now compliant because they have no updates left anymore. They're fully patched in this case, and we have basically all the updates installed. Now, again, this is great for a couple of scenarios. Makes it super easy. You can even schedule, and as I said, these updates for the future, so you can make them recurring updates. What I usually do, or what our customers very often do, is they do that based on tags. So you have, for example, if you have domain controllers or clusters you want to patch, you don't want to patch all nodes at the same time. So what we do is we create an update tag for upgrade group 1, where is domain controller 1, and then update group 1 gets patched on a Tuesday, and then domain controller 2 is in upgrade group 2, which will be patched on a Thursday, for example. So you can work with that. You can also do that dynamically, and really it just goes out and checks on the specific tags, but depending really on how you integrate update management. So this was the update management demo. Update management, as mentioned, does a couple of different things. It goes out, it basically assesses your systems. You can then deploy updates to it. It verifies the compliance of these systems and again assesses this, and you can again deploy updates to it. It works with Windows Server and Linux VMs. It can run in Azure, other cloud providers, or on premises. You can do custom approval criteria. You have that single pane of glass where you can see all your servers and the patch state of all your servers. And again, you can schedule these and do these update deployments, for example, weekly or monthly or whatever you prefer. So the next thing I want to talk about are different pain points here. What we can see here from Tailwind traders, right? And I just want to highlight a couple of them. Some of them, of their environments, they really want to have an overview, make sure that they have a compliance, right? They actually can see that their infrastructure is compliant, that their servers are compliant with different company policies. Also, their compliant experts are coming and say, hey, we want to have a list of all the servers from a specific department and want to see that they're compliant with that specific status. And we actually need tools to measure that. Now, you can imagine in Azure, for that, we have Azure policy and Azure guest configuration policy. But the question often came, how can we do that for systems which are running outside of Azure? And the answer is easy. We talked about that before. It is Azure and Azure Arc enabled servers. Now, I showed you before how that actually works, different things like how you can onboard servers. We showed you different management tools like Azure Monitor you can easily then use within Azure. Now for this scenario, I want to highlight you the governance and security features. And we're going to have a look at the Azure guest configuration policies we can assign to Azure VMs, but also to on-premises servers running Azure Arc, the Azure Arc agent. And then we can actually do a compliance check about our whole environment. So this is the architecture I showed you before. Again, on the left side, you see our on-premises servers. These could also run at other cloud providers. And we actually installed the Azure Arc server on these machines. And they are now part of Azure as an Azure resource in the Azure Resource Manager, and we can then onboard different Azure management services like Azure Monitor, Azure Update Management, or now what I'm going to show you now is Azure Policy. So let's have a quick demo for Azure Arc configuration management with Azure guest configuration policies. So here I'm back in the Azure portal, and you can see here the machine we recently onboarded to Azure Arc, and it again shows up as a Azure resource. And if we have a quick look at that machine, you can see here the status of the machine is connected, it's joined to a resource group, to a subscription. So it is now an Azure resource. So let's switch to Azure Policy. And Azure Policy lets me manage all these policies for my environment. And let's create a new assignment. So I'm going to assign a new policy. I'm going to select the scope. This can be a management group, subscription, resource group, or even a resource. So in our case, we're just going to select a resource group. And then I'm going to select the policy definition. And we have some built-in ones here, which you can leverage. And so we're looking for one, which basically checks if automatically update protection signatures are deployed. So we can select that, and then we can give that a description. Now, these are built, as I mentioned, built in, so you can just start using them. You can also build your own if you wanted to. So we have a GitHub repository where you actually can find examples how you build your own policies. So I'm assigned that policy, and this will take a while. We can now go to compliance view. It will actually check the compliance state of my systems within that resource group. So we will take the power of video editing and come back a little bit later in time. And you can see here now it says compliant. So if I go to this policy assignment now, I can see here that for my Microsoft anti-malware for Azure should be configured to automatically update protection signatures is working. And I can obviously then see all my compliant resources. I can see, if I have non-compliant resources, I can also list those, and I can actually figure out, okay, how many resources are actually not working. I can then go out and see why are they not configured the right way, and then actually take action on this. Now, Azure Policy is a great way. And again, with Azure Arc, we could now see the different servers running in Azure or also outside of Azure next to each other. And we get that single pane of glass where we can see the compliance view about that environment. So that was a quick demo about Azure Arc guest configuration policy. The next technology I want to talk about is Azure Security Center. Now, Azure Security Center really helps us with a couple of different things when it comes to security. It can actually go out and find threats and make us recommendation and alert us. So this is a great service, and you'll probably have seen if you configure your Azure workloads that you can enable that for your specific workloads and subscriptions to get all that information together. What a lot of people don't know is that you can also connect your on-premises, private cloud, and other public cloud provider workloads as well. So how we actually doing that is by using Windows and Linux agents, which then can go and get the Windows event log or syslogs or configurations from these specific servers and other services as well. We then do some normalization and we add some additional information to these logs with the agent, because then we can make some smarter decisions and give you some smarter recommendations as well. These will be then stored in a scalable log analytics platform, which we're going to see a little bit later, where you can then actually go out and you could already go and export these logs to Excel or Power BI and do your own analytics on it if you wanted to. However, with Azure Security Center, we add a little bit more to it. So what we do is we obviously can also add other Azure services like networking and PaaS services as well. And then we take advantage of our threat intelligence. So we spend a lot of money on protecting our own cloud services, our services like Xbox Live, Office 365, also Azure, obviously. And we take all that and much more information and we do some security analytics on it. With that, we can then do threat detection. So we can see, for example, if one of your servers connects to an IP address, which we clearly know is part of the darknet or is an infected PC or server or whatever, we can actually tell you, hey, this system connects to an IP address, which it definitely shouldn't connect. You want to take action on that and have a look, why is it doing that? We can then also give you recommendations to actually, before something happens, to make sure that your environment is configured in the right way. So this is all then done, and then we will present that in Azure Security Center, where you have a security dashboard, which delivers you the insights into what is going on in your environment. It gives you security recommendations, again, to take actions on these specific tasks. And then you can even go out and do some like further investigation with log search and so on. Or you can then go out and create security alerts. Like you can then, for example, just send notifications. You can trigger some REST APIs or build your own automation to actually do whatever you need to do. For example, send you a message in Teams or send a message in a Teams channel to a specific team so they can take action on it. So pretty cool stuff. And again, not just available obviously for Azure resources, but also for hybrid resources as well. And that is what we're going to show you in a quick demo. So let's do a quick demo on Azure Security Center. So here I'm back in Windows Admin Center. And what I'm going to show you here is how we can onboard a machine, which you haven't really used yet, and onboard that to Azure Security Center. So we can actually send these logs into a log analytics workspace. And then from there, we actually connect it to Azure Security Center, and Azure Security Center will then give us security recommendations and obviously also alerts if something would happen. So for that, I want to show you how that is done. So let's select server 2 here, connect to that server. And now we can simply go to, for example, Azure Security Center. That will help us easily to onboard that. So I can select my Azure subscription here. So I create a new log analytics workspace. Again, in your production environment, you probably use the same log analytics workspace you also use for monitoring and other things. But for demo wise, we just create a new one. We also create a new resource group for this demo. And then we click on setup. And this will now create this new log analytics workspace. This will create this specific information like the resource group, and then we'll download the agent and configure the agent on that machine. And you can see here, here it would show then the recommendation. It will take a while until actually these logs are analyzed. In the meantime, let's connect to another server and do the same thing as well. But in this case, we are just using an existing one. So you can see here we have the workspace already selected. So we're going to select that specific workspace. And let's go back and let's also add our server running in Azure. This one again is our Azure machine. So we can select that as well. Again, you can also directly onboard this from the Azure portal as well if you want to. So here again, we just select the existing workspace. We click on Setup. And now this will set up Azure Security Center on that specific machine as well. Now let's jump to the Azure portal. Here we are in the Azure Security Center, where you get all the recommendations and the overview. Under inventory, we can now see all the systems we have joined. So you can see here a couple of virtual networks and virtual machines, but also my on-premises machines. So if I switch back to Windows Admin Center, as a server admin, I can now go into my server here with Windows Admin Center, go to Azure Security Center, and I will get the recommendation directly for my system here. And I can see what I need to do. I can click on it and it will take me to the Azure portal where I can find even more information about that recommendation. So this was the Azure Security Center demo. Now, the next thing we want to have a look at is hybrid security monitoring for your environment, right? And there are a couple of scenarios where we can actually go, and we have a couple of different products here available which you can leverage in your environment. So how we attach hybrid workloads which are running outside of Azure is by using an agent, right? So we're going to deploy a agent on these hybrid operating system workloads, and depending on the operating system itself, we can then send the different security log data to, for example, Azure Log Analytics, and then also to Azure Sentinel. So what we can do here is we can actually go out and, for example, send Windows security events with a connector to Azure Security, to Azure Sentinel. We can also send for different connectors for identity to actually send on-premises Active Directory domain service telemetry to Azure Sentinel. We also have one for Microsoft Defender for endpoint to stream the alerts to Azure Sentinel. And then for Linux, we also have connectors for Linux operating systems that can forward syslogs and other data sources basically to Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel then is a service, is a cloud-based SIEM solution, which can go and analyze this telemetry to detect and hunt and then prevent and respond to threats against our hybrid operating systems. Again, Azure Sentinel is basically a hybrid service running in Azure where we can connect different sources. You also have, for example, connectors from different hardware, network gear, vendors, which can also send logs there. So it's a really one place to get all your security logs together, and then you can do some analysis and threat hunting there as well. So to have a quick look on how that could look like in a more architectural way, you can see here on the left side, we have resources living outside of Azure. These can be, again, if you look at it, on-premises systems. These can be running on your infrastructure, can be physical machines, or it can even be on like Azure Stack as well. And then we can also onboard workloads which are running at other cloud providers. And then they can be basically collected and then connected to Azure, to the Log Analytics workspace. And then you can take advantage of things I just showed you, like Azure Security Center or Azure Sentinel, which will give you that advanced security, these advanced security services. So I think it's quick time for a demo about hybrid security monitoring. And again, this is not just necessarily about security monitoring. It's like, I want to show you a little bit how monitoring in general can work for your hybrid systems. So what I'm going to do here is we're back in the Windows Admin Center, and we are going to onboard a server to a Log Analytics workspace. And then we're going to use the keyword query language to basically do queries against these logs. And we're going to show you that you actually can get everything out of these logs from different systems, everything you actually added in the connector. And then you can go through and get all these logs out. Doesn't matter if it's security logs or performance logs or system events, whatnot. And then you can then do different things like create dashboards, or you could create security alerts, and much, much more. So let's get us started. First, we move to the Azure portal and let's create a new log analytics workspace. We showed you that many times in Windows Admin Center, but for now, let's create a new log analytics workspace actually in Azure. Again, in production, you will probably use the same one. So we give that a new resource group. We give that log analytics workspace a name, and we select the region where the log analytics data is stored. Pricing wise, this is basically pay as you go. So the more logs you send into the log analytics workspace and the more you store, the more especially will that service will be costing. And so we create that deployment process, and this will create a new log analytics workspace. So let's switch back to our Windows Admin Center. And let's go to our file server 1 here. And we can actually now configure Azure Monitor. So for that, we click on Azure Monitor. We select the server here. And now we're going to select the subscription, and we're going to use an existing resource group. So with that, then we can also select an existing log analytics workspace. And then we hit setup. And this will now go out and download the agent, connect that agent to the log analytics workspace, and send these logs, sending logs to the log analytics workspace. Now, when we're back in the Azure portal, let's go to that specific Azure log analytics workspace. And here we can do some advanced settings. So we can obviously here configure like more data sources. You can see that we can onboard more data, but let's for the connected machines, let's add a couple of logs we actually want to have. So first of all, I want to see the system log. So let's add that. And then we also want to have, for example, the application log. So let's add that as well. And then let's save this quickly. And now the agent will send us even more logs, right? And then we can do the same thing for performance counters. You can see here I have a couple of them already as default, but I can actually go here and then have a look at the different other performance counters. So you can actually go through all the performance counters on these different systems. So whenever you need some performance data, you can actually find that here in that specific collection, and you can add that as well. Again, there's more to add, like syslogs and Linux performance counters and so on. You can even do custom fields if you wanted to as well. So now let's switch to logs, and this is actually the log editor, if you will, where I can actually create queries with the keyword query language. Some of you maybe remember it as Custo. So with performance here, with this query, I get the performance information in my log analytics workspace. So you can see here, this is all the different performance logs sent to that specific workspace with all that information here. So you can see here, if I drill in a little bit more, I get even more information about what this information is. I can then also do other things. I can, for example, do some more queries here. So very simple one here is obviously with events. So I can list all the events in my log analytics workspace. And again, this provides me now all the events of all the servers joined to that log analytics workspace, right? I can then do obviously some more advanced queries, so I can summarize them by count. So I can actually go out and summarize them by source, for example. So I can see here how many events do I have depending on the different event logs. And then I can also obviously drill into these and find some more information. Okay, so what is it actually depending on the different results I get here. I can also do, like, if I go back and do just events again, I can then see and drill into the different events here, for example. So I have like a DNS event and so on, and can then find all the information for that specific event entry, not just necessarily like I showed you before from the performance part, but also from the event itself. Now, from here, obviously, this is great if I just want to search for something really specific, but I can build some really nice queries, like really advanced queries, where I can really find just the information I want. I can use that for reports. I could also like just export this data. I can create new alert rules. Now from here, I could say, okay, whenever a specific event, for example, happens, or I build a query which goes just for a specific event. Let's say a specific user logs in to a machine. I could actually go out and build that query and then save that query and create a new alert rule. So as soon as that a new entry is created, it will then actually create an alert, which then means it could be just send an email, a notification. It could go out and kick off a runbook. It could go out and send a message to Teams, for example, or whatever your automation basically is, and you can get notified about this. And again, same thing happens. So like if, for example, the same thing on performance data, if, for example, you're running out of disk space or other stuff as well, you can build these alertings as well. Again, not just for security, but also for performance data or other events, you can create that. Now, you can also go out and, for example, build some nice charts. So if you just don't want to have this log information, you can go out and build a chart which then actually shows you all the performance informations from your specific set of services, VMs, performance data, storage data, for example. You can also go and see like if all the backups are working and say, okay, how many backups did I do? How many of them were successful? How many backups did not work? And build actually some nice charts here. You can then pin these charts, for example, on the Azure portal page dashboard. And then you can actually, if you log in, you can have multiple dashboards. One is, for example, your monitoring dashboard for backup. So you can then click on that and you get an overview about all the things you did. And we have the same things. We have examples, for example, for governance, where you can actually build a governance dashboard also based on these log queries, right? So very powerful tool. Something you really should definitely have a look at. So this was the hybrid security monitoring demo. Let's do a quick summary of what we just saw. So first of all, we had a look at how Tailwind traders can use Azure Update Management to ensure that all their hybrid cloud compute workloads have the most recent software updates installed. Again, very big task for a lot of IT administrators and IT departments to make sure that they have all the patches installed and actually can have that single pane of glass view where they can actually have a look at which updates are missing on which systems, and then go out and trigger these update deployments, as well as also automate these update deployments. Another thing we had a look at is on Azure Arc enabled servers and how we can actually check that all our servers running on Azure, but also in a hybrid environment on premises, and that other cloud providers have a compliant state, right? We checked how for simple settings, we can also, for example, make sure that all the servers are in a specific time zone so that there's no configuration drift. We can make sure that, for example, we have some advanced rules which checks for insecure password settings, so we can make sure that all our servers have secure password settings enabled, and it doesn't really matter where they are running. If they're running in Azure, if they're running on premises in our own data center, if they're running in a branch office, in a retail store, we can keep control over all these servers. And again, also other cloud providers. We also had a look how Tailwind traders can actually use Azure Security Center to take advantage of the Azure Security Services and find out about notifications made to different files and get obviously recommendations to different challenges or different security alerts generated by the system. And then we had a look at how we can use Azure Sentinel to be alerted when there is specific some suspicious activity or security events happening, to the event log, or also some event log or monitoring information in general. And actually you get, like, you can actually build alerts and dashboards and so on. So with that, we have some additional resources I want to share with you. So if you want to know more about these services we just spoke about, you can have here a look at, for example, Azure Update Management, Azure Security Center, Monitoring Hybrid Security, or Azure Arc Configuration Management with Policy. So we have all these aka.ms links, and as you can see, then we have these shortcuts to bring you to the right documentation pages. You can also follow our team here on our blog, and if you want to reach out, feel free to connect with our team to actually talk about. We are here to help and get your feedback on what is working and what is not working. So this concludes our Microsoft Azure Virtual Training Day implementing hybrid infrastructure. So let's do a quick recap of the content we have had a look today. So first of all, we got an overview about Azure hybrid cloud technologies. We had a look at hybrid networking implementation and how you can connect your on-premises environment to Azure. We had a look at how you can take advantage of the Azure management technologies to manage your compute workloads. We also had then a look at how you actually can manage and deploy apps and data in a hybrid environment. And last but not least, we also had a look at hybrid cloud security and how you can take advantage of Azure management and security tools to make your on-premises environment even more secure. So with that, we want to say thank you for attendance, and I hope you enjoyed these sessions. If you want to go further with your learning journey, I highly recommend to have a look at Microsoft Learn, where you have your self-paced learning platform for free. And then also make sure you check out the calendar for future Microsoft Azure virtual training days.